This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. Fellas, you've heard the phrase, look good, feel good, right? But why not add smell good to that too? That's where Sterling Soap Company comes in. First, Sterling Soap is 100% natural and has a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne. Second, there's a scent just for you. How about burgundy? Yeah, it's more than a color. The Sterling Soap folks blend natural essential oils with hints of mahogany, golden amber, and sandalwood. Or how about D503, an intensely masculine scent inspired by Legend by Mont Blanc. And third, you will feel good about the price. For just a little more than you'd pay at the grocery store, Sterling Soap will leave you feeling clean, refreshed, and ready for whatever's next. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com.
Imagine a town forged in the fires of industry, rallying around a band of gridiron gladiators. The Pottsville Maroons weren't just a football team, they were the embodiment of a community's grit, determination, and soaring aspirations. In 1925, they clawed their way to the pinnacle of professional football, only to have it all ripped away in a controversy that still echoes throughout the halls of the NFL. A new book is out that tells the complete story of the Pottsville Maroons. It's titled Marooned: The Rise, the Fall, and the Redemption of the NFL's Pottsville Maroons. Maroon plunges you into the heart of this captivating saga with the roar of the crowd where it mingles with the clang of the coal mines. Authors Jeffrey Payne and Darren Hayes chronicled this team's rise from the humble beginnings to the gridiron dominance and everything in between. Experience the thrill of victory as the Maroons conquer their rivals. Their every triumph a testament to the small-town spirit conquering the big city odds. And the fall, and of how they get the redemption and try to get their championship back. It's all covered in Maroons, and you have a unique opportunity to win an autographed copy from Sports History Network and Pigskin Dispatch. The details are found for this contest at sportshistorynetwork.com. Your headquarters for sports yesteryear.
And we'd like to welcome everybody back to the Football's Family Podcast, the first episode of the new year. And being that it's the new year, I am very grateful that the old year with the Titans has been taken care of, and then we don't have to think about them until August. I am also grateful that we have some good football going on in the NCAA tournament, which I think is a little bit weird how the setup was, but at least it had some good games. But now we are in the time of year where the playoffs begin, and we have several games coming up this weekend. And one of the games that we have is we have several of the games coming up, but let me pull up right here in my phone the NFL playoffs, and let's go down some games coming up this weekend. We have the Chargers and the Texans. We have the Steelers and the Ravens. We have the Bills and the Broncos. We have the Packers and the Eagles, the Commanders and the Buccaneers, and the Vikings and the Rams. Now, out of all those things, one of my guests this week will talk about one particular game, but I really think at this point, I really would love to see the Vikings and the Rams. That would be my top game to see. The Packers and the Eagles are going to be great. I don't think the Broncos are going to stand up against the Bills. But my guest will be talking a little bit about one of the teams and their history. Would you like to introduce yourself today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm Jack Gilden. I'm a writer, an author, and a journalist from Baltimore, Maryland.
His Collision of Wills, Johnny Unitas and Don Shula and the Rise of the Modern NFL is a book that I would put on par with just about any other NFL book I've read. I enjoyed that. And I had you on a little bit ago, and I'm glad that you're back on, my friend.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you, Jeremy. I love talking to you, of course.
Well, your picture, and you're going to have to correct me. I cannot remember the name of the book you wrote about the equestrian, the horse book that you wrote.
Yeah, it's about thoroughbred horse racing, and it's about a special horse named Spectacular Bid from back in the late 1970s, and the name of the book was The Fast Ride.
That's right. It's been a long time since I've heard that. But your pictures that you put up with that cigar in your mouth, typing on the typewriter. I thought that is what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, that was my concept, and the idea was for that biography photo on the flap of the book to kind of look like a cranky old newspaper man, which, I mean, I had the cranky part down down solid already. So, but that's a fun picture. People really get a kick out of that.
I
It's like
like that one. I
H.L.
like
Mencken
that
or
one.
something.
And I was wondering what type of cigar that was because that probably smelled really good too.
Yes, it was a good one. I got it at the cigar store before we took the photo. I forgot exactly what brand it was, but it was something from Latin America. It was fantastic.
Well, when you let me
I'll
know.
let
Just
you
send me
know.
a message and I might want to try it myself. But
Okay.
but anyway, what we're going to talk about today. Now, I am not familiar with the Colts in Baltimore. I know a little bit because I know you went through a lot of wilderness to get to the promised land with Baltimore Colts playoffs. You had the Super Bowl three, correct? No,
Yes.
Super Bowl four and
No,
five.
Super Bowl three. Super
Yeah,
Bowl three.
Super Bowl three you were in. Super Bowl five you won. Um,
Right.
but Super Bowl three was the team that everybody thought was the best team at that time, and it was. It was a lot better than the Jets. A lot better than the Jets. But it didn't work out in that one. Super Bowl five, you won because of an amazing kick. And that ended up being how that won. But I am not familiar with the history of the Colts in the playoffs. Now, the Ravens, on the other hand, I'm very familiar with being a Broncos fan and a Titans fan.
Hmm.
2000, y'all took the heart right out of me.
I was there.
Oh, you were in Nashville for
I
that,
was
weren't
in
it?
Nashville. Yes.
Oh, okay. The Ray Lewis taking the ball right out of Eddie George's hand still hurts me today. But we sort of got a revenge a few years ago when Derrick Henry ran wild over the Ravens. But I don't want to say we got to come up
I'm still not over that one.
But tell me, please educate me because that's what this show is about. Uh, Tell me a little bit about Colts playoff history and Ravens playoff history.
Well, the Colts I mean, the Ravens are a very worthy successor to the Colts, I would say. I mean, to me, for as long as men play football, the Colts will be the team of Baltimore. The Baltimore Colts will be the all-time team of Baltimore. But the Ravens have been a worthy successor franchise. And I mean, the Colts, in my book, the reason why they're the all-time team is because that was a very unusual franchise. You went really from one man who might have been rightly considered the greatest football coach of all time, Weeb Ewbank, and you could make a strong case for him to this very day for that title. And they transitioned in the early 1960s from him to Don Shula, who could rightly be considered the greatest football coach of all time. So it was a very extraordinary uh, happenstance there. And so, the Colts played in the two most significant games in league history, which was the greatest game ever played, the sudden death overtime thriller in 1958, which they beat the Giants in the first ever overtime game. Then they repeated as champions in 59, and they were on their way to repeating as champions again for the third time in 1960 when Unitas was really beaten up by the Bears, and the whole team was really beaten up by the Bears a few weeks before the end of the season. And the game was so brutal. I don't think either team won another game the rest of the year. Two really, really fine football teams. And so the Colts lost it a little bit, but then when Shula came in, they went back to the title game in 1964. You beat the Packers twice that year to win the division, beat the Bears twice that year to win the division, and then faced the Cleveland Browns in the title game. And Cleveland had some really nice players on that team. They had Frank Ryan was the quarterback. He was a mathematics PhD. They had Paul Warfield as a receiver, one of the greatest of all Hall of Famers. They had Gary Collins as another receiver who should be in the Hall of Fame. Look him up if you don't know who he is. He was one of the most magnificent receivers in the history of the game. And of course, they also had Jim Brown.
Yeah.
So there was an awful lot of firepower on that team, and but they had a terrible defense, and everybody assumed the Colts were going to kill them in the championship game, and of course they ended up losing to them something like 27 or so to nothing, and it was a gigantic upset, maybe the biggest upset in league history until when, Jeremy, just a few years later, when the Colts played the Jets in Super Bowl III, also probably the second most important game in league history, and lost to Joe Namath. Joe Namath guaranteed victory and delivered. And the only thing that you said earlier that I might take the tiniest exception with was that the Colts were so much better than the Jets. The Jets were a very fine football team because
Well,
Weeb Ewbank assembled them, and he built them. As Raymond Berry told me, they were built in the image of the '58 Colts, and you could really look
I
at.
could see that, but and I'm arguing with a Colts fan here, so I'm going to lose this. But the reason why I say that is if you look at the people, and I get what you're saying about Weeb Bank, but when you look at the people and compare them on paper, your Colts was they were just better. They were just
I mean,
better.
I think there's almost a football fan in the world that would disagree with you. But I would only say that the Jets were a far better team than what people thought they were, and also what the odds would say. And if I talk to any of those old Colts today, the ones who are still alive that played in that game, they would say I was crazy to say that about the Jets. But the Jets, when you really go back and you look at that roster, I mean, that was a very well balanced football team, very well coached by Eubank. One of his hallmarks was to make the players very self sufficient on the field. Namath called the plays. To this day, I don't know that many contemporary fans know this, but he was considered one of the best play callers in football at the time. A very smart play caller, just like Unitas was, and it was a very, very good team that they lost to there. Maybe you're correct. I mean, you could persuade me. Maybe you're correct that the Colts were much better as the prevailing.
I'm just here, a voice in the wilderness. Now, I want to point out here.
Yes.
You caught that reference, didn't you? Um, this is Gary Collins. Okay, I was not familiar with him.
Okay.
University of Maryland.
Yes.
Okay, NFL champion 64, game MVP 64, three-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro, NFL touchdowns co-leader 63, NFL All-Decade Team in the 60s, consensus All-American in 1961. 331 receptions, which in that time was a lot. 5,290 yards, 70 receiving touchdowns. So he's looking like almost every 5 passes he would catch, he
Yeah.
scored a touchdown. Good gracious. I did not know who he was. Thank you for
Compare him
bringing
to
him.
Raymond Berry, and he is less than Raymond Berry, but not gigantically less than Raymond Berry. Or compare him, instead of Raymond Berry, compare him to guys who came around a generation later, like Cliff Branch, or
Yeah.
compare him to Lynn Swan and Stallworth and guys like that. And he looks just as good as any of those Hall of Famers that.
The big difference for that though is he doesn't get the publicity because that was pre Super Bowl time.
Right.
But can you imagine though if somebody is good, that's amazing for hit the time frame in the 60s where the run was heavy and they throw the ball and it didn't matter about the interception so much because that was just like a punt for them. Golly, that's amazing. 70 touchdowns. Whew. There's a
Yeah,
lot of people
well,
today that
this
won't
is
get
what
that.
he said. He
What's
said part of the problem with playing in the Browns in the '60s is nobody remembers anybody on the Browns except for Jim Brown, and that's unfortunately one of the sad things about playing with a giant star like that is that you live in the shadow. Everybody lives in the shadow of that one giant star. But think about this. Gary Collins was the MVP in that '64 championship game. Think about the great players that played in that game. Gino Marchetti,
Yeah.
Lenny Moore, who was MVP that year. He and Unitas were MVPs both in different polls. Unitas, who was MVP that year. Um, Jim Parker, um, Raymond Barry, Jimmy Orr, um, not only Jim Brown, but also Leroy Kelly was on that team. Paul Warfield. Think about all the Hall of Famers that played in that game, and he was the MVP of the game, and yet is not somehow not in the Hall of Fame. it's ludicrous that he's not there, and nobody ever even talks about him going into the Hall of Fame. He was
If
one great football player.
I want to, you may know this off the top of my head. This is way off what we were talking about, but that's fine with me. What is Lynn Swan's stats? You know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but they're less than Gary Collins, I
Okay,
believe.
because to me, and I'm not diminishing Lynn Swan, but to me, Lynn Swan made his Hall of Fame in the Super Bowls.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? To me personally, I don't think a lot of people agree with this, but if there can be a guy like Dan Marino who makes the Hall of Fame and never wins the Super Bowl, to me, there should be people who are the opposite, who are great in the postseason, but maybe aren't great in the regular season stats that should be in the Hall
All
of
right,
Fame. So,
listen to this:
yeah,
336 receptions,
compared to
5,000.
what, Gary?
No, this is Lynn Swan.
Yeah, but what was Gary's receptions compared to Lynn Swan's?
I have to figure out
Oh,
how to.
sorry.
No,
Okay.
it's okay. I just have to minimize and maximize. So 331 to Swan um, is three. Where is it? 331 to Swan's 336.
Right. So they're virtually identical.
Okay, receiving yards 3,000 or 5,600 or 5,462 for Swan. Collins is 5,299.
Right.
Okay. Touchdowns is where Swan is less. 51 for Swan, 70 for Collins.
Right. That's a major difference.
And you say, well, that's two different worlds, and there was probably what 10 years difference, 9 years difference between the two. Uh, you had Franco Harris on that. You had my mind went blank. You had some other offensive
Yeah. Terry
weapons.
Bradshaw.
Yeah, Terry Bradshaw. You had Terry Bradshaw there.
Right.
Uh, you
I
had
mean, think about that for 1 second. I mean, Lynn Swan played with a Hall of Fame quarterback who I guess he took his lumps over the years, Bradshaw. But I mean, you and I would probably both agree he had a booming cannon for an arm, and he was superb in the postseason and in those Super Bowls. I mean, Bradshaw was a great player. I don't think that Gary Collins played with any quarterback
no.
that could equal Terry Bradshaw by a mile. Not that that diminishes Lynn Swan in any way, but I do think it talks to how good Gary Collins was.
Well, think about this when we talk about how if we are talking about how good somebody is, doesn't necessarily mean that we diminish the other people in the process. What we're
No,
doing is showing how great somebody was. Uh,
right.
and when I was looking at the team that they had together, John Stallworth to me was a better all-around receiver than Swan was. He just wasn't as fancy as Swan. He just wasn't.
Yeah,
And
I totally agree. Well, I mean, Swan, even his name, like some people are just born, kissed by God, It's like they have the name, the person. Like look at Johnny Unitas. I mean, the name Unitas, the whole persona. Just everything seems to go in some people's
well,
direction. Lynn Swan is one of those people
this
too.
it just shows you that from '69 on, the team at the Steelers, the management team knew how to draft people. They just knew how to do it.
Oh yeah.
I think in '69 they drafted Joe Green, and look what happened. He was pretty decent.
I mean, he's probably to this very day one of the two or three greatest defensive tackles of all time. You know,
Him, I
Bob
would put
Lilly.
him, I would put him out, yeah, with Bob Lilly.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Imagine putting those two in your middle, having Reggie White, and even going to today, a healthy J.J. Watt. Good gracious, you're not going to go anywhere.
Well, I mean, I think it's true today, and it was certainly true back then. But to me, if you have a great front four,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, I mean, you're almost guaranteed to win a championship. If you have that great defensive front four,
Imagine
and you don't have to blitz and sell
you
out
don't.
very much, you can
Imagine
win a lot of
having,
football games.
imagine having the top seven with Buckish right in the middle, the
Yeah.
front seven, having Ronnie Lott on the side. Good gracious, you're not going to go anywhere. If a
No.
guy like Ronnie Lott will cut his pinky off to be able to play a game, that's the guy you don't want to mess with. I was actually, this is way off the subject again. I was actually looking through my cards. I forgot that Ronnie Lott played for the Jets.
Yeah, me too. I didn't remember that at all.
I believe he played for the Raiders too.
Yeah, for the Raiders, I remembered. Hey, how about this though? Here's another great receiver that should be in the Hall of Fame who is not. That's a character in my book as well, and that's Jimmy Orr. Was
Yes.
unbelievably great. Go back and you look at his yards per catch over his career. I think in his rookie season, and Bobby, he played for the Steelers, and Bobby Lane was his quarterback at the Steelers, and I think he had something like 27 yards per catch that year. His rookie season, I think to this day, it's the highest yards per catch in NFL history.
26 yards per reception. Again, what the kids today, I say kids, the younger people today are kind of spoiled with the whole passing game. What I remember growing
Yeah.
up with is the rushing game because you had people like Walter Payton that made it and Barry Sanders that made it look easy. And you,
Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, Barry Sanders. I mean, look, I grew up with Earl Campbell. He was magnificent. I come from a city that went from Lenny Moore to Lydell Mitchell, but to me, Barry Sanders was probably if he wasn't better than Jim Brown, he was. I mean, to me, he looked better than anybody. He had the power, he had the speed, he had the moves, he had the acceleration, he had everything. He was fantastic.
you know what a running back I would love to see in the Hall of Fame is Roger Craig.
Yeah, he should be. He
Now, if you
was
don't
he
know
was just
Roger Craig,
fantastic.
Christian McCaffrey is Roger Craig now. Roger
Yeah.
Craig was Christian McCaffrey back then. Probably
Yeah.
not as gifted as McCaffrey, but he had everything going at one time.
Well, he didn't have to be either. I mean, he had Joe Montana and Jerry Rice at times, and I mean, they had so many
Well,
weapons on those teams, and one of the greatest coaches of all time. So he didn't have to be as good as
Will,
McCaffrey to really be big for his team.
there's a reason why the West Coast offense could work for them that it didn't so much work for Cincinnati. It worked
Yeah,
because of Roger
players.
Craig.
Right.
Of
It
course,
was
Joe
what I was
Montana
trying
didn't
to
hurt
say. It's Joe
anything,
Montana,
but I mean,
Jerry
they had John
Rice.
Taylor.
Right.
They had several good players there.
Great offensive lineman and just everything. But I always felt that Bill Walsh was a little overrated in a sense. I know that's ludicrous, but in a sense, like people talked about how progressive and what a tactician he was. Yeah, but I always thought where his what made him great was his player selection. He really picked some unbelievably great players for that franchise in the draft and other free agents. I mean, he really knew a good ball player.
Wasn't
Yeah, that's what I
wasn't
thought his strength was.
Montana? He wasn't a first round pick. He was a third round pick, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think it was a third rounder. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah. He didn't look like he was going to do anything, and all of a sudden he became Joe Montana. Quickly, because I am getting closer to the time that Zoom tells me I have to get off.
Okay.
You have a team now with the Ravens that came over from Cleveland, but they're a Baltimore team now. And I know the moment that y'all raised your first Lombardi, it was bittersweet for Cleveland. Now I know there's some people in Cleveland who are fans of the Browns that moved to Baltimore, but they're very quiet because you don't want to say that up in Cleveland.
No.
And I believe Cleveland got their team back in '99, and they've been hurting ever since then. I actually saw it was a computer graphic that actually went down and made the shirt. Have you ever seen it? The shirt that has all the starting quarterbacks on it, they made it all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty bad. But you've had pretty successful. You've had two coaches. Well, you had Bill, oh my goodness, Brian Bellick, and now you
Right.
have one of the Harbaughs. You've had two pretty successful coaches in the
And Ted
last.
Marchibroda.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You've had some pretty good ones, but the last two have been the top ones. You have a very consistent coaching staff. You have a very consistent front office. Ozzie Newsome could be in the Hall of Fame for so many reasons, and his front office thing could be part of it. He was one of the greatest tight ends ever for the Browns, but his player selection, good gracious.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, the first two players he ever drafted for Baltimore were John Ogden and Ray Lewis,
Yep, and
both in the Hall
real
of
close to
Fame.
each other. Uh, if I remember correctly, he also picked up Jamal Lewis, and Jamal
Yes.
Lewis, people don't may not realize that he was a 2,000 yard rusher.
I mean, I was too young to have seen Jim Brown play. I was born, I think, in his last season, but I always imagined when I watched Jamal Lewis that that must have been what Jim Brown was like. He was big and strong and super fast and just impossible to bring down.
I'm kind of miffed in a way, but not really. I would have loved to seen LaShawn, or not LaShawn. My mind went blank. My mind went blank. Um, Saquon Barkley. Sorry, LaShawn McCoy. I was thinking of the because he was a Eagle. Saquon. I would love to see him break the record this year, but it wasn't to be.
I would have liked to see him at least get the opportunity to.
Yeah,
It'd be
yeah.
like sitting down Cal Ripken before before the day that he tied Lou Gehrig, or sitting down I don't know. I mean, or Hank Aaron before he could break Babe Ruth's record. It was just insane. I mean, this is a real problem that football has, and it's something that they should really make everybody play till the end. They should probably say, I don't care what your situation is, you can't rest starters, and if we're going to charge people for the tickets, you got to play the players. I
Well,
think.
you remember? Did you watch the Broncos Chiefs game?
What
The, this,
just last week or
yeah, that
that
was terrible.
I didn't see it. No.
No, well, Bo Nix is a great quarterback. I don't think he's
Yes,
going
he
to
is.
win the. I think Jaden Daniels going to win the Rookie of the Year, and he should. Jaden Daniels is a baller, but Bo Nix looked like he was Peyton Manning out there. I think they
Yeah.
won
Looks
34 to
good.
nothing.
Really good player. I
I
think,
think they're going to get
in
bounced
fact,
in the first
I'll
round.
tell you something, Jeremy. I think the Broncos are going to upset the Bills.
Oh, oh, I'm a Broncos fan from 86, 87 on. To me, what I want to see in the Super Bowl, I want to see Derrick Henry win a Super Bowl. It hurts me to say that about a Titan for Raven, but if anybody can win it, I want to see Derrick Henry do it because I think he is Hall of Fame material, and if he wins the Super Bowl, he's in. Okay, but
I
if
got news for you. He's in anyway.
well, I think he is. I think he
I
is,
think
and
so
that'd be
too.
fine with me. But you see what I'm saying? Super Bowl wouldn't
Yes.
hurt. Uh, but I want to see either the Bills versus either the Vikings or the Lions. One of those teams wins the Super Bowl.
Well, right, because they all three of them really have. I mean, the fan bases have really been cheated over the years.
But
They've
can you
really,
imagine what it'd be like? Because the Vikings lost four Super Bowls in the late was it 69? No, 70s. They lost four Super Bowls in the 70s. Uh, and
and the
then
Bills
the
lost
Bills
four.
lost it in the 90s. Can you
Yeah.
imagine those two getting together?
Yeah, those two poor franchises. Well, I mean, and the Vikings and the Lions are great teams, and the Bills. I don't really think that the Bills are well rounded enough to win the Super Bowl. I think in the AFC, I really think Baltimore. I think that's by far the best team with the deepest roster, and I think obviously Kansas City. I mean, I think I think that Andy Reid really outfoxes Harbaugh when he plays against him quite a bit. He really seems to have his number.
All right. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He I just think it's hard to beat the Chiefs when it's 18 against 11.
You're adding the officials in on the Chiefs roster.
I, there's a lot of conspiracy out there, Jack, and I know you know this, that the NFL is gunning for Kansas City. What I have a problem with that is Kansas City is a relatively small market. If you want something big, you go for the LA teams or you go for the northern teams. The Midwest teams are kind of small.
Yeah, but they like their poster boys, don't they? And they like to keep Taylor Swift on TV as much as they can. And I mean,
That hurts my head. That hurts my head.
me too. I don't even honestly, I really couldn't tell you a single song that she sings. I barely even know
Oh,
who she is.
I
If it hadn't
can.
been for football, I wouldn't even know who she was.
I can. Why? Because I have two daughters.
Well,
Golly. I'm driving down
yes,
the
I
road,
have a
Jack.
daughter too.
I kid you not. Yeah, you do. And she's a talented artist. Uh,
Yes, thank you. I think
she's
so.
amazing. I'll need to talk to you about a book I want to write. She may be a good artist for that. Uh, so I'm driving down the road and I want to listen to my Dave Matthews radio. It's number 30, channel 30. And then all of a sudden my daughter presses a button and Taylor Swift comes on. And I'm like, okay, we're not listening to that. And of course, guess what? The player is going to play, 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 play. We listen to that the entire way home.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at this real quick because, like I
Okay.
said, I'm running on times here. Thank you
Okay.
so much for being on here. You're
Oh, I
amazing.
love it.
Thank you. All right, the Chargers versus the Texans. Who do you got?
Oh, easily the Chargers.
Yeah, I do too.
Baltimore played both teams and beat both teams. The Jim Harbaugh's a great coach, and the Chargers look like a far superior team to me than the Texans.
The Texans bottomed out. I think that they've got CJ Stroud as the real deal, but they just didn't have it this year.
Well,
So you have,
he
all right.
was horrible this year, and he was really horrible against the Ravens when he played them. I mean, everybody in town here was asking what happened to CJ Stroud. He was so good last year, but he didn't look good this year
No,
to
he
at
he
least to us.
didn't. But give them time. They have a they're Will Anderson is the real deal too. All right. The Steelers versus the Ravens. I know what you got on that one.
Yeah, I don't really think that the Steelers, I think they were playing way over their head for most of the year, and they're backing into the playoffs, having lost four in a row. I don't think it's happened in a decade or more.
I don't think
That
they're going to
team,
do it.
I don't think so either. I just don't. I mean, people are like, "Well, it's a rival game, and it's this and it's that." I don't see it. I think the Ravens are not only going to beat them, but I think they're gonna put the smack down on them.
And they should. They should. Denver versus Buffalo. Are you going to go on record being the Broncos?
I think the Broncos. I have a feeling about the
All
Broncos.
right. All right. Okay. So what we have here is the five Chargers playing against the three Ravens and the Broncos playing against the Chiefs. All right. Who do you got? Chargers, Ravens.
I think the Ravens are the best team in
I
the
agree
in
with
the
you.
NFC.
I agree with you. What about the Broncos, Chiefs?
Broncos, Chiefs. I think the Chiefs, of course. I think it'll be the Chiefs and the Ravens in the AFC title
So,
game.
so who you got?
Well, I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm sure you think so too.
Oh
If
yeah,
if
yeah. It's hard to pick. To me, if Derrick Henry does what he did back in, oh good gracious, back when the Titans were doing their thing, and he hasn't lost a step. You have you have the quarterback, you have the running back, you have wide receivers, and you got a defense. I don't think the Chiefs can take them.
well, this is what I think. The Ravens and the Chiefs played each other in the very first game of the year, if you recall, and the
Mhm.
Chiefs beat them again. But it was super close. Remember, Likely had like a toenail out of the
Yeah.
goal. He was out of bounds instead of getting a touchdown to win the game. And that was with Derrick Henry. Honestly, this will kill you to hear me say this. I thought he was washed up after those first two games. He looked super slow. He didn't get any yards. And then obviously that shows you how much I know about football
You're
because he
killing
was
me, Jack. I'm over here
incredible.
just crying. I'm over here crying because he is that good. I think the
Yes.
Ravens could take the Chiefs.
You think they can take them or
I
cannot?
I think they can.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially I mean, where I was going with all that is once Henry found his way. I mean, he didn't do anything in that Kansas City game, but when he found his way a game or two later, I mean, I don't think anybody could stop the Ravens when Henry and Lamar are both on their games. And the
No.
defense is not the Ravens defense of yore, but it's a pretty good defense now. It's gotten to be like middle of the road, and it's more than ample enough given what that offense can do.
Now the only difference I would have about this is I would have the the Bills winning, which they would go to play the Ravens,
Yeah.
and the
No, the
Chargers would go
Ravens would
play the
go to the
Chiefs.
Bills. The Ravens would go to the Bills if
Hmm.
if, if the Bills
Yeah,
win.
well, yeah, they'll go to the Bills, but the Ravens and the Bills would play, and I still think the Bills would do it. My opinion, of course, this is just what I want. The Bills win the AFC. However, you know better than I do, the last few years they have not looked good, and when the time comes, they just come
Yeah.
short. Quickly, all right. So Minnesota versus the Rams.
Minnesota versus the Rams. I mean, how can you go against Minnesota right
I
now? I would go with Minnesota.
I
I
agree with
love
you.
the fact that Darnold is resurrected.
Hell, don't take this last game against the Lions as who he is. That Lions team Sunday night was insane.
Yeah.
And imagine if they had Hutchinson back. Good gracious. All right. The Commanders versus the Bucks.
I like Washington.
I do too. I do too. I do too. So, did you pick the Ravens in the AFC?
I did.
Okay. All right. If the Bills are not involved, I want to see anybody but the Chiefs. Sorry, Chiefs fan, but y'all had enough. It's like when the
Yes. Should
Patriots are
like
doing their
rooting for
thing.
Belichick again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, the Packers versus the Eagles.
I like the Eagles.
I do too. I do too. Although upset to me, the Packers could take the Eagles. I just don't think it will happen.
I don't think so either.
Okay, so you have the Vikings versus the Eagles.
Yeah, I like the Eagles again.
I do too. I do too. And then you have the Commanders versus the Lions, and I think I'll give that to the Lions.
Me too, because the Commanders are a nice team, well coached, and a great quarterback, but he's a rookie, and you know,
One or 2 years too early.
yeah, that's what I would say too. I think, it's really hard to win in the postseason. You could see Lamar struggled early in the
He did.
postseason, and you were just saying you were just talking about somebody else. Oh, Josh Allen has
Yeah.
struggled in the postseason. So I mean, maybe Daniels will do better than those two did as a young player, but you're really talking about doing something that really great players could not. So,
I
you
think
know,
he'll win the first round, which is a huge deal for them to be in the
yeah,
playoffs. I think the Commanders are real, just a year or two early. All right,
I
Lions,
think so
Eagles.
too. Who?
Lions, Eagles. Which one?
I still like the Eagles. I
So
know
you
that
okay?
one of the underdog, but I like the Eagles.
All right. So you have the Birds in the Super Bowl, Ravens, Eagles.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Ravens and Eagles. And I think it'll be a very different game than the regular season game they played against each other here. And I just like that Eagles franchise. It's well run. They have, they're I think a lot of ex Ravens front office people took it over a few years ago, and they seem to be built in the same image. So I really think that they both have lots and lots of talent on the squads. They both have good quarterbacks. They both have great running backs. So I really, that to me, that's a winning combination.
I I I see your point, and you see the Eagles win. I think that keeps Nick Sirianni around. I think that if he loses in the first round, I think he's gone. I don't think people will keep him.
Yeah, you don't think so?
No, he's ruffled some feathers, so to speak. Sorry about that. That was awful. But he's ruffled some feathers there. But to me, winning cures a lot of stuff. And if he
Yeah,
makes a deep push, I think the Vikings can beat the Eagles. Um, but if the Vikings Lions play in the NFC Championship game, I think the Vikings will pull it out.
is that right? Huh, that's an interesting choice because they
They
just did lose to the Lions, right?
they
Last
did,
week.
they did, but when you put them on a different stage, we'll see what
Yeah,
happens. But to me right now it would be the Bills Lions in the Super Bowl, and I have the Bills coming out on top.
yeah. I mean, Bills and Lions in the Super Bowl with the Bills coming out. I mean, that's plausible. That's a very good one. I personally love the Lions franchise because as I guess a football historian
Yeah,
of sorts, I love the old Lions, Bobby Lane and
Bobby
Joe Schmidt.
Lane. Dude, do you think that they regret letting Bobby Lane go to the Steelers? It's only been 50 some odd years. You think they regret it still?
well, they never won it again. And
No.
they've had some marvelous players on that franchise,
It Calvin
including Night
Johnson and
Train
all.
Lane, Alex Karras,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Webster
know.
there.
Earl Morrall was the quarterback for a
Oh, he
while
was,
there.
wasn't he? He was.
Yeah, oh yeah.
If the Lions
Don
make it to the Super Bowl and beat the Bills, it wouldn't hurt my feelings either. I love to see an underdog team like the Lions come back. Their coach is probably, if he wins the Super Bowl or make it to a Super Bowl, they'll sign him up for a lifetime contract. They said, "Here's the keys to the city. You can have whatever you want."
Well, I'd love to see the Lions win the Super Bowl. I do like Philadelphia. I like that franchise. I but of course, my heart's with the Ravens, and I'd
Yeah.
like to see the Ravens win the Super Bowl. I think they can and they should. I think they've got the best roster in football, and I really believe that they have a historic player in Lamar Jackson. I think when it's all said and done, he's going to become regarded in the same breath with Brady and Manning and Johnny Unitas and Montana, and I think
And
he's He's going to be in that conversation.
He is one of the most talented. When he came out of Louisville, I remember watching him in Louisville because we're not too far from there. Um, I went up there and actually didn't get to see a game, but I've talked to people and they're like, he is the real deal. He is probably the most complete dual threat quarterback that we've seen since Vic.
I think better than Vic, don't you?
Oh yeah, I think he's the most complete since him, but I think he's better than Vic.
Yeah, I agree in both accounts, or maybe like even like Fran Tarkington or
All right, so Zoom kicked me out, but we're starting all over again. If you hear a kind of a shutdown and then me talking again, it's because there's two different episodes put together. Mr. Jack is back with us, and we're going to end because it hurts me to look over at my Titan stuff, Mr. Jack. I've got it all over the place here and realize that we're probably 20 years before we're back to where we need to be. It just hurts me. But I like to enjoy other people. And the smile that you have right now is something that I'm enjoying because, like I said, I follow you on Facebook. Your daughter is talented. You're talented. Um, I enjoy watching other people flourish. However, it hurts me to say that the Ravens could be there too. It just hurts, but I'll get over it. Just a couple minutes, and you are an awesome person, awesome guest, and an awesome writer, and I'm glad that you're on my show here. Um, Give us in a couple minutes a memory that makes Baltimore football, Colts or Ravens, just a memory to you, something great.
well, I really prefer the Colts memories in a way because that was my first love.
All
You know,
right, all right.
but
So this will make me feel better because a lot of the memories I have about Baltimore is the Ravens are beating the Titans. So let's just talk about the Colts then.
okay, well, yeah, we'll talk about the Colts. I guess I prefer them because that was the team, that that I really loved growing up. I fell in love with the game of football just like you did. I not only was a fan of it, but I played it myself in high school and for 4 years. And I've always had a fascination with football. But my memories of the Colts are going to be very different than almost anybody else of my generation because I spent 4 years living with the classic Colts, the Johnny Unitas Colts of the 50s and 60s in my head while I wrote Collision of Wills. And it's just like knowing those people when they're in your head every single day and you concentrate on them. So, I mean, obviously the 58 Colts and winning the 58 championship game, that's the thing that I think about, even though I wasn't alive for it. And and in a way it makes it more special because it's almost I know that you are a person who enjoys the Bible and the legends of that era, and in a way, when you go back to an early era, I look at like Johnny Unitas almost as like a legendary, not to be blasphemous, but like Moses, like somebody who goes so far back, he's almost like unknowable, like almost somebody that you can't see or understand. But I love that. I mean, Baltimore will always have that aura about it because of him and because of those teams. So even though I wasn't around for it, my most sacred memories of football surround Johnny Unitas and the Colts.
Now, one of the things, can you see that? Oh, it's
Yes.
that to me. This is a 58 ring. It's
Yeah.
very blurry, and I apologize for that. It's just, but you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen a couple of them.
Yes, I have.
To me, the rings that they had back then, the simplicity of it is the beauty of it.
Oh, I totally agree.
The
I
rings
totally
that you
agree.
had
That
back
58
then,
ring. I mean, that thing, if you had Johnny Unitas's 58 championship ring, in my own opinion, I know there'd be plenty of people would disagree. That would be the holy grail of sports memorabilia. I'm sure one of his children must own that today and prize it because what could be cooler? What would be a better piece of memorabilia
what
in American sports?
what did he? Again, we're way further than what I thought we were going to be. That's okay because this is what we're doing, Mr. Jack. Did he value this ring more than any other thing he had?
I
Like,
don't think he valued any of the things that he had. He was an utterly unsentimental man. His daughter Jan, who was a close friend of mine, she said that he would win. Every week he'd come home with a different game ball, painted up with his name on it, the score, the whole thing. You know how they are. She said he'd come home. Here's another ball. He'd say he'd toss it to the kids. They'd play with it in the backyard. The dogs would pick them up and carry them around the backyard. He just really wasn't about memorabilia. He wasn't sentimental. I know at times he cared about his stuff. Eventually, he stored it all and then gave it all over to, in the end, to the Babe Ruth Museum. But he wasn't all that sentimental about that, about items.
well, let's do this real quick. Looking at that ring and then Super Bowl five ring. I did a program not too long ago. I say not too long ago, um, several years ago, well, when I started this, talking about how great the Super Bowl rings are. The Colts ring back then, the Super Bowl five,
Yeah,
beautiful,
beautiful. Not
beautiful.
as beautiful, in my opinion, as a 58 championship ring, but beautiful, a great ring.
The what I like about it is the color. They actually have the blue in it.
Yeah,
Now, but I've never seen the 58 ring until then. There's a lot more heart in the 58 because you
yeah.
left it out on the field.
Well,
There's
I mean, and there's something just very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Very innocent about it. It's almost just like a glorified high school ring in a way, except that it belonged to the Colts. You can see the jumping Colt,
yeah.
logo in it and
I I
things
like
like that.
okay, that opens up another another can of worms that when I get you back on, we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
I like the old school stuff. I like the old school Colts, uh their rings, their uniforms. They
yeah,
did carry over some of it to the modern day Indianapolis Colts, but um, the simplicity of the stuff back in the 70s and 80s to me always like I had a quilt of the huddles. You remember them? You may not remember them. They were like animated. They were the mascots animated.
yeah,
And I had it, and I remember the Colts, and they were the horse, basically the horse bucking,
yeah. The
and they
horse
were
buck,
made so
right?
kids, yeah, so they were made so kids can have it. That is the stuff I remember, the 49ers and all those things. It was just
Yeah.
I like
I
that.
mean, these were just wonderful, and they harken back to a time when it was all less slick and glitzy, and it was more like a sports team, and less like a corporation or whatever. And it was very appealing, and that's what made football so great, I think.
Do you know the one thing I can remember that I disliked the most? Now, I wasn't a 49ers fan, but I believe in the 90s or something, they changed the red in the 49ers. 90s, something like that, early 2000s, they changed the red a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
That's not good.
No, I agree. Or how
Don't.
about changing? This is the most egregious example of that. The Eagles going from
Oh,
Kelly
they
Green
moved
to,
from Kelly Green. That
oh,
if Reggie White and Randall Cunningham and Jerome Brown, if they wear it, do not change it.
if they wear it, how about Norm Van Brocklin and Chuck Bednarik wear? They wore the same uniform as more or less as
Oh,
Randall Cunningham
that Chuck, well, I'm going with my generation. I can remember that Chuck McNarick. The one thing I remember about him is standing over. Was it Frank Gifford
or
in
Frank
that picture?
Gifford.
Knocked
Yeah.
him out. Do not change the Kelly Green. And they said this is going to be a throwback jersey. Just make it the real thing.
Or how about the Jets? Like going away from the Joe Namath uniform. Why would you? That was a gorgeous uniform, that original Jets uniform.
Don't.
Why would you ever deviate from it?
Well, that tells you something about the Jets.
Right. Well, that sure does. And they haven't had one good ball player since since Joe Namath.
I'm not saying anything, but when you mess with something perfect, that's what
Right.
happens.
Right.
Mr.
Well,
Jack, thank
I
you for
tell you.
being on.
Jeremy, I love talking to you. I'm a big fan of yours. I love your show. And anytime you want to have me back, it
Well,
would be it would be my
I,
pleasure to
I
be here.
I tell you what, we'll see how your weekend works this week. I'm just there for the games. My team closed up shop about 2 months ago. So I want to see some upsets. I think the biggest upset we're going to see is the Commanders. I think the Commanders are going to pull it off. I think they're going to beat the Buccaneers. But to me, if we can see, I really think the Ravens are a very dangerous team. I don't know how far they're going to go, but I think they're the most dangerous team on that
Well,
list.
we'll have to hook up after the weekend and see how my Broncos pick held up. So
I,
feel free to gloat on me and tease
oh,
me
I'm not going to
when that
gloat.
all goes
Growing up a
well.
Broncos fan, I would love that. I would love that. I like Bo Nix, but to me, sentimental, I want to see the Bills and the Lions or the Bills and the Vikings. I just want to see a team. The Chargers hadn't won a Super Bowl either. The only Super Bowl I remember, they got slacked. They got beat down by Steve Young. I think he threw 6 touchdowns in that game. That was
Yeah.
insane. The Chargers hadn't won anything, but I'm looking at the rest of the teams. I think they've all had a Super Bowl or two, other than those teams.
Boy, I
Uh,
just want to just interject and say, I really love those Dan Fouts Air Coryell Chargers. That was one.
oh, the what was it? What type of blue was that?
That was like not the powder blue. It was the
Powder
like
blue.
kind of electric blue.
The electric blue, yeah. The Lance Allworth, that is probably the best combination I've ever seen.
That was the powder blue.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the 70s to 80s, Dan Fouts. Yeah, I can see that too.
Yeah. Oh,
Let's
Dan
see.
Fouts. He was a cool
I'm
player.
going through this. Every team has won a Super Bowl except for the Vikings, the Bills, the Lions, and the Chargers.
And the Browns.
Well, I mean, in the playoffs now. Because my Titans hadn't won a Super Bowl either in the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
Kids today do not know how great the Browns were back when Paul Brown was their coach. They just don't know how
Or
great they
even
were.
forget Paul Brown for a second. As great as he was, how about Blanton Collier? He
It's true.
he averaged something like 10 wins a year for almost a solid decade.
That's pretty solid.
That's very solid. He was the coach that beat Shula in the 64 championship game.
No kidding. I didn't
Yes.
know that. Well, it was in your book, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
I just dawned on me when you were talking about that. It's like, yeah, I read that somewhere. Well, I might have read it in his book.
Yeah. You've read it in my book, I'm sure.
Thank you for coming on, my friend.
It's great to talk to you, Mark. I'm sorry.
Well,
Jeremy.
that's my middle name.
Jeremy Mark McFarland.
Exactly.
Yes, I know. Well, it's great to talk to you, Jeremy. I love seeing you, and I'll see you again soon.
You will. Take it easy, and thank y'all for listening to Football's Family. If you're listening and not understanding about Fran Tarkenton was back in the 70s, even now, like a cheat code in Madden. He played for the Vikings, then went to the Giants, then came back to the Vikings, and I think he played in 3 Super Bowls because the first one they played, I cannot think of his name, but he was from Canada.
Joe Cap.
Yeah, Joe Cap. Tarkenton was a cheat code that no one could figure out how to beat unless it was in the Super Bowl. And that's
when he retired, he had held all the major passing records. He had surpassed Johnny Unitas in all of them. But, I think he didn't get along with Norm Van Brocklin, who was his original head coach, which you can imagine because Norm
didn't get along with anybody.
Guy. What's that?
Norm didn't get along with anybody.
With anybody, no. But he was one of the most heroic players himself as a player, but as a coach, he was, oh my God, nobody.
The heel gets the heat. The babyface gets the cheers. But the jobber gets, well, the job done. And speaking of jobbers, Barry Horowitz wasn't there to win titles. He was there to build them. By selling every move, every storyline, and every new star that stepped into the ring. He was the secret sauce. And now, he's the headline in his new book titled Wrestling is My Gimmick, My Life on the Wrong Side of the 3 Count. This memoir is a deep dive into wrestling's most underrated position and the man who made it an art form. Whether you're a fan of wrestling, a fan of sports history, or just love a great story, this book is for you. Again, that's Wrestling is My Gimmick by Barry Horowitz. Grab your copy today before the count strikes 3.